All right, welcome everybody to the very last Rising Tide Foundation lecture of 2025. And I'm extremely happy that we're going to be ending on a spiritual note, which is the appropriate thing to do. We all know that following geopolitics and things like that can become a little bit burdensome on the mind and on the soul. And you really do need to feed the higher things, the higher pleasures, to give the mind and the soul what it needs to do the heavy lifting. And we're going to need to do a lot of heavy lifting in 2026. It looks like there's a lot of storms a brewing, a lot of tests of our character is gonna continue. There will be many opportunities to become better people, as every challenge does create an opportunity to become the best part of yourself possible. So that's going to be fun. Um, but we have to be strong in so many other ways. And Dan Leach is somebody who has really honed his craft, his poetry within the context of a moral identity for decades. And for those who haven't had the pleasure of reading Dan Leach's poetry, he's been working with David Gosselin for some time. His books, Voices on the Wind and Places Where the Soul Goes, are two fantastic compendiums of poems that are available in the description box. I highly suggest people pick those up. And Dan has given a wonderful past presentation on poetic compositions, the question of the creative powers, the highest quality of the creative powers that unite both the best of the logical, the reasoning capabilities, as well as the aesthetical and moral sensibilities in the educational development of people, and the political ramifications of what that means. So today's class, Dan is going to tackle a subject which is close to my heart. I think it's close to everyone's heart here on the matter of the sublime. It's not everyone agrees what this word means, but it is extremely potent. So without further ado, Dan, I'm going to leave it all to you. And like usual, when you're finished your formal remarks, we'll open up for a little lively dialogue with the audience. It's all yours.
Well, I'm glad to be back here. Thank you for inviting me, Matt, and Merry Christmas to everyone, and a very blessed New Year. Um, I, I got the idea for this discussion. I don't want to call it a lecture. Uh, After uh, the showing of The Devil at Woodstock, the film that David and Matt put together, which I thought was brilliant, and had a very profound impact, I thought. Uh, and it got me thinking. Um, well, actually, Matt explicitly asked at the end of it. David and I were on for some questions and answers afterward. Um, he Matt asked, "Well, what do you think? This has portrayed the evil that has befallen my generation and subsequent generations. What do you think the remedy is to this evil?" And I thought, well, you could give a very trite answer, and say, well, it's God, going back to religion, morality, these sorts of things. But I think the answer is a much more profound issue is involved. The idea struck me when I considered this, that what we are involved in is indeed a spiritual war. If you consider how organized and how devoted the perpetrators of this evil, the people who, as David I thought, brilliantly described, uh, so assiduously planned and carried out the attack on my generation and subsequent generations to subvert the culture, the morality, and ultimately the happiness of this generation. It's unavoidable, I think, it's unavoidable to consider that this is organized evil, that it is dedicated to the cause of evil, and uh, and I think that when you consider uh, this absolute passionate commitment uh, to evil, and the passionate hatred for the good, um, that these oligarchs that did this, or who were the agents of it, shall we say, um, that you have to think about what is the pathology of these kinds of people. I think it's important to consider. I think, and again, I'm not a psychologist. I'm not a preacher. I just, from the standpoint of poetry and art, this is something that's been dealt with by Dante and many other great minds. But I think this film brought forward this issue in a new kind of way. Um, I think that these oligarchs are so tortured by their own spiritual emptiness, their own alienation from the good, perhaps because they grew up in households in which there was no love, there was no sense of a devotion to anything good. Um, uh, that they're they're so empty inside that they've turned to uh, the cause. They've adopted the cause as a way of validating their own existence, shall we say, of drawing others into their world. Right? And they become devoted to the cause of evil because they have to draw other people into it to find any meaning to their existence, if that makes sense. In this sense, it reminds me very much of Milton's portrayal of Lucifer after the fall, rallying his fallen angels to the cause of undermining God's creation and drawing other souls, ruining uh, uh, other souls is the only way that they can validate their existence. Um, so this, I think, if you consider this psychology, I guess you could call it the pathology of organized evil that we saw in the film, The Devil at Woodstock. It begs the question: what is it that they're trying to destroy? What is this quality in human beings that they're trying to destroy? And since it is in sort of a negative way, you can impute that there is something, a natural goodness in human beings that they're trying to destroy from the very fact that they're trying to do it, um, if that makes sense. Now, this, I think at this point, saying a few words about my personal experience, uh, could throw a little bit of light on this, because it is how I came to think about these kinds of things. I, of course, I wrote that poem, "The Devil at Woodstock," um, because I was there. First of all, I became a very enthusiastic participant in the counterculture, in all aspects of it. I mean, I was a flower child, and and uh, about 1975, I began to notice a shift in the culture. It became much less about any idealism of peace and love and the things that we thought we believed in the 60s and early 70s. It became all about personal pleasure. It became all about, this is when the disco culture emerged. It became about getting money so you could have pleasure. Um, the sex, the drugs became the dominant things that were sought after. And I began to feel extremely empty and unfulfilled by this. And in a sense, I felt betrayed because my generation was turning away from the things that I thought offered some hope for the future. Um, and it was then that I became political. I became involved in Lyndon LaRouche's organization, and as a result of that, I was introduced to classical culture, which is very important to the political ideals that organization pursued. I had never really listened to great classical music or read great classical poetry before, even though I had been briefly introduced to it in high school, but it didn't sink in at the time. And I became uh, overwhelmed by a quality in the greatest classical art that I had never experienced before. It wasn't mere beauty. It was something greater than that. It was something more profound and moving than that. And if any of you have ever felt this way when listening to something like Mozart's Requiem or Beethoven's Ninth Symphony, the third movement of which just melted me to tears, or the Ode to the West Wind by Shelley, which, if we have time, I will cite, which had a special, has always had a special power with me. But there's many other things that contain this quality. But there was something that was so profoundly moving about it that was beyond just melancholy. It was almost pain, but it was a beautiful pain. And I began to uh, to seek out what this was. And I read everything I could get my hands on because I knew that this was what was described by by writers throughout history as the the sublime. So I wanted to understand everything about it. So I read, I read Edmund Burke, and I read Longinus, and I read all these people, that the dictionary tells you wrote something on the sublime. Now it'd be Wikipedia. It didn't exist at the time. Um, and I came upon uh, Schiller's uh, essay on this, which I think I will cite in just a minute, so you can bring that up, Matt. But it also, the other thing that struck me about this was that this was not something that was just, shall we say, particular to me or to any one group of people. This is something that affects human beings all over the world. Think, for example, of the Tiananmen Square demonstrations uh, in 1989, and the role that Beethoven's Ninth Symphony played in those. It was the spirit of that great movement, whatever you might think about what resulted from that, and many other examples of that throughout Eastern Europe. Beethoven's music was inspired the movements for freedom. So I know it's not just something that's a trifling matter that was only a matter of personal feeling. It has a great power to it. So Matt, maybe now you could pull up the Schiller quote. Schiller wrote two essays on this matter, one of which was sort of turgid, I have to say, because what Schiller was trying to do was to describe in philosophical terms, and the terms which were sort of the lingua franca of that day was Kantian philosophy. So he tried to use Kantian terminology and Kantian ideas to describe the sublime. And I think in his first essay, it was, as I said, turgid and a bit, unclear. But then he wrote another one, and the second one is the one titled "On the Sublime," I believe. The first one I think was "Of the Sublime." But this one, it's worth anyone's while if you've never done it to read this. I've read it maybe 30 or 40 times in my life. I come back to it all the time because it is so profound a concept. Um, and you have to read the whole thing really to get the full impact of it. But the essence of it, I think, is contained in this little segment that I'll read. He says, there are two genii which nature gave us as companions throughout life. The one, sociable and lovely, shortens the laborious journey for us through its lively play, makes the fetters of necessity light for us, and leads us amidst joy and jest up to the dangerous places where we must act as pure spirits and lay aside everything bodily, as to cognition of truth and performance of duty. Here it abandons us, for only the world of sense is its province. Beyond this, its earthly wings cannot carry it. But now the other steps up, earnest and silent, and with stout arm it carries us over the dizzying depth. The first of these genii, one recognizes the feeling of the beautiful. In the second, the feeling of the sublime. Indeed, the beautiful is already an expression of freedom, but not that which elevates us above the power of nature and releases us from every bodily influence, but rather that which we enjoy within nature as men. We feel ourselves free with beauty because the sensuous instincts harmonize with the law of reason. We feel ourselves free with the sublime because the sensuous instincts have no influence upon the legislation of reason, because the mind acts here as if it stood under no other than its own laws. The feeling of the sublime is a mixed feeling. It is a combination of woefulness, which expresses itself in its highest degree as a shudder, and of joyfulness, which can rise up to enrapture. And although it is not properly pleasure, it is yet widely preferred to every pleasure by fine souls. This union of two contradictory sentiments in a single feeling proves our moral independence in an irrefutable manner. For as it is absolutely impossible that the same objects stand in two opposite relations to us, so does it follow therefrom that we ourselves stand in two different relations to the object, so that consequently two opposite natures must be united in us, which are interested in the conception of the same in completely opposite ways. We therefore experience through the feeling of the sublime that state of our mind, that the state of our mind does not necessarily conform to the state of the senses, that the laws of nature are not necessarily also those of ours, and that we have in us an independent principle, which is independent of all sensuous emotions. Now that I think is an extremely, it sort of captures what the entire essay is about. He goes on to sort of fill out this idea, but I think if we let that sink in a little bit, what he's describing is the fact that there is something in the human psyche, the human soul, which is immortal, which is greater than our physical being, which is finite and limited. It's something that is immortal, and it's something that's universal. But here's where I think it's is very interesting to consider the deeper implications of this, given the fact that there's something in us which is immortal and infinite. Why don't we live that way all the time? Why does it take something like a sublime work of art, or even something like, Schiller described different ways in which the sublime is inculcated, and therefore different types of it, you might say. He describes it as sublime of nature. And this is something which is of course universal. This is the feeling you get when you see the ocean, or the night stars, or even a mountain, particularly majestic mountain. You feel on at the same time almost crushed, almost intimidated by the physical power of this thing. For me, I've always experienced this when there's a storm approaching. I think Shelley also loved this image. You know, the power of it, it could kill you. I mean, it literally is an overwhelming, powerful force, but yet there's something spiritually uplifting about it. And I think no one has ever been able to miss this when, you know, when they consider, for example, the night sky, the seeming infinity of the night sky or the ocean. Um, that's the that's the sublime of nature. Um, so this is a capacity in the human psyche that's, so to speak, sleeping within us. It's a potential within us, which is awakened by through the agency of a sublime object or a sublime act or a sublime feeling associated with music, poetry, art, in its higher forms. Now, whether this capacity within us, and this is where I'm, you know, going a little bit into an area which is in which there's great debate, in which we can have a discussion of. But my personal belief is whether this capacity within us developed evolutionarily, um, or whether it developed, it was inculcated culturally, through, you know, through our culture. But then again, you have the problem that this seems to be something which all cultures arrived at or had have within them, since human beings all over the world respond to this, or whether you believe that this was a gift of divine, from the divine, from God. I don't think that it makes a difference, um, because any way you look at it, it would be equally as, it's there. First of all, you have to admit it's there, and it's equally miraculous in any case, because um, we have to account for its existence in the universe in which we live. I mean, human beings developed from the biosphere, and the biosphere developed from the lithosphere. Um, Human consciousness and everything uh, involved in it, uh, the highest qualities of which are these spiritual qualities, exist within the universe. And since we know that nothing in the universe can exist without the potential for it first existing, there's something in the universe which brought this quality, this capacity in the human soul into being. So I personally think that's miraculous. Whether you try to describe it in, you know, in biological terms, chemical terms, or any other terms, it's still miraculous. It means something. There's a quality in the universe that manifested itself in the human beings. And I'll read something in a few minutes that will I think uh, underline that. So, what kind of universe develops this quality? That's the question. Uh, Human beings, mankind, you know, with all our faults, we're nevertheless capable of this of divine-like powers of thought, um, and of heroic deeds, of sacrifice, and totally selfless love. These are things which don't have an explanation in evolutionary terms. Um, uh, you know, the care for a child, for an offspring, this is common throughout the animal world. But sacrificing for the sake of a higher idea, this is something only human beings do. And I believe these things are very closely related, that I'm speaking of right now. So, the most powerfully moving depictions in art and in history are these ones which I think convey that human beings are willing to sacrifice their physical existence for the sake of this divine uh, part of them, their soul, and for the sake of others, uh, proves that this is something very real. I believe this is why I think the most sublime uh, uh, acts to contemplate are things like the death of Socrates, for example. It's it's sad beyond belief, but yet it's so uplifting because that his spirit has conquered his physical existence. Or think of Joan of Arc, another great example. Um, the but especially the sacrifice of Jesus Christ. This is the most sublime act one can even imagine. All of these things they terrify our mortal selves, and I think that some people unduly focus on that aspect of it. Think of Mel Gibson's movie. Matt and I were just talking about this. It's all about the horror of it. But what is it that's so beautiful and uplifting about it? It's the fact that this overcoming of the physical self for the sake of liberating the soul to uh, its immortal potential was done as an act of love for others. So whether we believe, I think, whether we believe that this is something that is comes from evolution or divine power, I think it's nevertheless uh, something miraculous in the human psyche, and has a demonstrable effect, I must say, on human history. This is not something that's simply a phantasm of a few minds, whether they be religious or poetic or philosophical. The evocation of this quality of the sublime, or the capacity for it in other human beings, has moved history. As Christianity has become, the cultural force that it has. Joan of Arc, her sacrifice did create the modern French nation. So I think that is, and human beings, by accessing their divine creative qualities, which are in service of the divine, have demonstrably changed the physical world. Science, the act of discovery, has allowed human beings to change the physical world around us. So, those who say, "Well, this is all just subjective, uh, a subjective matter," have to deal with the reality of this. Now, this brings up an interesting point, and this is something which is just my personal uh, uh, take on it, you might say. But since we know, and I think Nicholas of Cusa, for those who know him, and if you don't, the great Cardinal Nicholas of Cusa, a 15th century philosopher and Catholic cardinal, who I am not a scholar of, I must say, But one idea that what I have read of his that always stuck with me is the idea that nothing can come into being in the universe without the potential for it existing. Um, Not that it pre-existed, but the potential for it pre-existed. Now, let me read something, and if this appears a little bit disjointed, you'll have to forgive me. Some plans didn't go the way they were supposed to this weekend, and I didn't have the time to sit down and go over my notes again and think about this again. But I think when you consider again that the quality in the human being to connect with the immortal and the infinite through the sublime um, is something that is a not only a sleeping potential within each human being, but is a potential which pre-existed, or it never could have. The potential for it uh, had to pre-exist even the development of mankind and even the development of life on the planet Earth, or these things never could come into existence. So think of this quote from the first chapter of John, the first Gospel of John. This had a profound impact on me when I heard it again several years ago. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things came to be through him, and without him, nothing came to be. What came to be through him was life, and this life was the light of the human race. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. And then goes on to describe the ministry of John, and then these words in verse. And the Word became flesh and made his dwelling among us. And we saw his glory, the glory as of the Father's only Son, full of grace and truth. So I think that is, very consistent with what I've been describing here. Um, uh, so if this potential is sleeping within us and can be awakened by the sublime, but only by in its highest form, you could say, that seeing a mountain or the ocean, you're seeing the majesty of God's creation, and that is what makes it sublime. That's true. But in these cases where someone creates the you might say the pathway to it through a great work of art, like Beethoven's Ninth Symphony or Mozart's Requiem, or many other things. These are just a few of my favorites. How does this happen? What inspires the artist to do this in the first place? Well, you know, I think the only thing that ever motivated an artist to do this. I mean, there are artists that you could think of somebody who just wanted to look good, or to get famous or whatever. They never created anything truly beautiful, let alone sublime. These greatest works of art are inspired by love, a love of this quality in every human being. What the Bible describes as agape, the highest form of love, the love for the Creator and the love of the image of the Creator in other human beings. This is the secret. This is the higher power of all great works of art, and its effect on us when we are moved by the sublime reminds us of our true selves, that we come from this immortal, infinite place. And this is what I believe is meant by redemption. Our true selves are redeemed from From what? Well, uh, uh, the we forgot ourselves because we live in the world, because we have to survive. Uh, we are blown about, buffeted by the winds of change and the winds of of our physical needs, of all the things which life entails, and uh, uh, we forget or simply become inured to this. And there's a quality in the sublime when you see for example, a great drama of Shakespeare. This is the secret of great drama, is it just rips you out of the ordinary and places you in in a place where you uh, uh, are uh, in the presence of something divine or something great, something noble and great. Um, so I think in this regard, um, the most, to me, the most sublime thing to contemplate is the ultimate act of love for humanity, which was the sacrifice of Jesus Christ, and uh, and the most uplifting thing was his resurrection. But I want to say I didn't want to do this discussion as a preacher, and I apologize if it's coming off that way. I think that the principle we're talking about here is true, whether you believe uh, in the tenets of Christianity or not. It's simply the truth about humanity, that this quality exists within us. And if you admit that, you kind of have to deal with these religious questions or spiritual questions. But I believe that sublime art is the ultimate remedy for this cultural degeneration that the film Devil of Woodstock described, because by familiarizing uh, people, with this and reminding them of who they really are, they are strengthened. Uh, they're able to recognize what is not that and what damages that in the human psyche, and are able to guard against it. Uh, and ultimately, as Schiller described, they don't really have to guard themselves about it, because this they prefer to live in this space more than pleasure, more than fame, more than any of the things which corrupt the human soul. So in that sense, I think well, developing a sense, a taste for beauty is a good start, because as Schiller describes it, it harmonizes with the higher laws of reason. But only the sublime has this redemptive power to it. And therefore, I believe is the ultimate weapon that we have in what what I think it really is a spiritual war. And hopefully I have shed a little bit of light on, or a different perspective on, the concept of a spiritual war. Um, at least that's what it means. What it means to me. I think by only by presenting this to this generation will we be able to sort of recapture the souls, um, uh, of the next generation of great artists, poets, musicians, etc. Um, and I believe that because I know that's what captured mine, and got me out of the you know the morass of the counterculture and everything that implied. So that's kind of what I had to say.
Mm.
Um, if you would like, uh, I will recite Shelley's poem because I think that's what he understood as well, and expressed so profoundly in the Ode to the West Wind. You want to pull that up, Matt? Do we have
Yes,
time
sir.
for that?
Yeah, for sure. You're the maestro. Let me pull it up here 1 second. There you go.
Okay. Ode to the West Wind. O wild west wind, thou breath of autumn's being, thou from whose unseen presence the leaves dead are driven like ghosts from an enchanter fleeing, yellow and black and pale and hectic red, pestilence stricken multitudes, O thou who chariotest to their dark wintry bed the winged seeds, where they lie cold and low, each like a corpse within its grave, until thine azure sister of the spring shall blow her clarion o'er the dreaming earth and fill driving sweet buds like flocks to feed in air with living hues and odors, plain and hill. Wild spirit, which art moving everywhere, destroyer and preserver, hear, oh, hear, thou on whose stream, mid the steep sky's commotion, loose clouds like earth's decaying leaves are shed, shook from the tangled boughs of heaven and ocean. Angels of rain and lightning there are spread on the blue surface of thine airy surge, like bright hair uplifted from the head of some fierce Maenad. Even from the dim verge of the horizon to the zenith's height, the locks of the approaching storm. Thou dirge of the dying year, to which this closing night will be the dome of a vast sepulchre, vaulted with all thy congregated might of vapors, from whose solid atmosphere black rain and fire and hail will burst. Oh, hear, thou who didst waken from his summer dreams the blue Mediterranean, where he lay lulled by the coil of his crystalline streams, beside a pumice isle in Baia's Bay, and saw in sleep old palaces and towers quivering within the waves' intenser day, all overgrown with azure moss and flowers so sweet the sense faints picturing them. Thou, for whose path the Atlantic's level powers cleave themselves into chasms, while far below the sea blooms and the oozy woods which wear the sapless foliage of the ocean know thy voice, and suddenly grow gray with fear and tremble and despoil themselves. Oh, hear. If I were a dead leaf, thou mightest bear, if I were a swift cloud to fly with thee, a wave to pant beneath thy power and share the impulse of thy strength, only less free than thou, O uncontrollable. If even I were as in my boyhood, and could be the comrade of thy wanderings over heaven, as then, when to outstrip thy skiey speed scarce seem a vision, I would ne'er have striven as thus with thee in prayer in my sore need. Oh, lift me as a wave, a leaf, a cloud. I fall upon the thorns of life. I bleed. A heavy weight of hours has chained and bowed one too like thee, tameless and swift and proud. Make me thy lyre, even as the forest is. What if my leaves are falling like its own? The tumult of thy mighty harmonies will take from both a deep autumnal tone, sweet though in sadness. Be thou, spirit fierce, my spirit. Be thou me, impetuous one. drive my dead thoughts over the universe like withered leaves to quicken a new birth. And by the incantation of this verse, scatter as from an unextinguished hearth ashes and sparks, my words among mankind. Be through my lips to unawakened earth the trumpet of a prophecy. O wind, if winter comes, can spring be far behind? Okay. So I think that it expresses in Shelley's own way the the thought that we've been discussing here. So, any discussion or questions, I'd be happy to entertain.
Yeah, so let's open it up. Thank you so much, Dan. And yeah, the idea of the sublime is so obscured in our society. So I appreciate this homage to the sublime as a concept because whether it's in the popular fiction that we're fed in Hollywood movies or Netflix shows or comic books or novels, the that that place where the soul can go at its best, that's at the heart of so many of the greatest revolutions in science and political freedom and artistic beauty. There's a conscious undermining of it, right? Which is why they have to put so much slander. Like if you look at the movies about Joan of Arc, she's often portrayed as somebody who's just crazy hearing demons, or
Mm.
Martin Luther King.
Yeah.
So many books are published presenting him as a womanizing drug addicted fiend, or so many character assassinations that are designed to run cover to prevent the mind of people from actually just learning what is going on inside the hearts of these sublime individuals who shaped so much of the unfolding of the best of the human condition. So I really appreciate you just putting a focus on that concept. And I'm going to make the Schiller essays of the Sublime and on the Sublime available too. And I encourage people to take some time this week and just read the Schiller essays, because these are wonderful compliments to what you just did in this class. Bruce got in there with a question early on. So Bruce, it's yours.
Thank you. Dan, is there a website where I can find or where you put what you want people to find about you?
There is something wrong with my sound. I
Oh,
apologize.
are you
Let me,
able to hear?
because
You couldn't hear at all what Bruce had said?
I'm able to make it out if I listen.
Okay, yeah,
He asked if there
it
was a
sounds like a
website
yeah. He's asking for your
where
website. Yeah,
where what can be found.
where
The
your
work you
work.
want people to find.
Yeah, do you have like a Substack or a
Oh,
website or someplace you
well,
publish?
my poems.
Yes.
Yes, where can I learn about you, what you'd like people to learn about you, Dan?
Oh well, my poems. Many of the better ones have been on the Chained Muse, the Age of Muses, Dave Gosselin's site. Um, I
Yes.
did a I did a presentation with a couple of other poets on the Rising Tide Foundation several years ago, which you can look up in the archive there, in which I discussed my work and recited a few of my poems.
Thank you. And
Um,
you've published a couple books?
couple, yes.
Great.
Uh, the
On Amazon, presumably would
They're on
produce
Amazon, yeah.
most of them. All right, great. I
But
want to,
but you have
oh,
to you have search for well, Matt can put the link there, but you have to
yeah.
search now for Daniel R. Leach,
Well,
because
that's good.
there's
Okay.
another Dan Leach in
All right.
Georgia who writes short stories and some poems.
Your discussion today was really profound. I found it A to Z really comprehensive of the pathology of organized evil. That's a real organizing principle to help anyone understand and convey, that aspect of modern life. I want to ask you, so much of the sublime is discovered just by anybody listening to music, anybody seeing a great dance, anybody going to a concert, seeing a band, whatever, and pursued by so many in meditation and other, practices, and really attainable, mercifully, and for me, I have found tons of corroboration, but also vision and wisdom and understanding, and that equals empowerment for me in the countless near-death experience stories that I enjoy listening to, reading about, watching, et cetera, et cetera. What do you know of them? And if anything, what's your opinion of them?
Oh, there was something wrong with my speaker. Now I can hear. Okay.
Were you able
Uh,
to hear his question?
yes, I was.
Okay.
Yes, like you, I've explored many of those stories, and it only confirms for me the reality of um, of our spiritual heritage. You know,
Mm.
we are, I believe, we all are children of God. We are, you know, uh, there's a beautiful passage in one of Keats's letters where he described, he was not uh, uh, did not belong to an organized religion, but he describes human beings as sparks of the divine that were thrown out into the universe so that they could grow and develop into fully matured souls, and could come back to this divine principle as uh, an actual developed soul, and that it can be no other way. That you have to exist in a world of pain, suffering, trial, in order to develop and be able to fully appreciate your divine um, uh, parenthood, if you will. Although he didn't put it that way, but I love that image of sparks of the divine, the one divine being scattered into the universe, sort of like what Shelley just described. So yeah, uh, I believe that's these near death experiences are very interesting. They happen in every single culture, whether whatever the religious beliefs of the person, they all have the same characteristics to them. But that's just evidence. I believe the best evidence for our divine um, uh, 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 identity is this relationship that we have with great art.
If I could have one more quick question and then let you hear from others. What do you make of the idea that when you say immortal, which I love, I hear eternal. It's probably synonymous, and the notion that we incarnate through many lifetimes to have the adventures, golly, maybe even have the fun, but certainly to learn the lessons, that whole model of existence. What do you make of that?
Reincarnation?
Yes.
I don't know. I've often been tempted. I even wrote a poem with that as its theme, you might say. Often been tempted to believe it because it seems like justice would demand it. However, I know that on the other hand, uh, we have the idea that we have one life, and on the basis not of anything that we do or don't do, but on the basis of our being redeemed by a merciful and compassionate being. Because after all, if we are actually children of the Creator, um, and are loved by that Creator, and love is the actual organizing principle of the universe, which I believe is the message in all of this, then we are all going to have an opportunity to be redeemed. and we don't need, 1,000 lifetimes like the Buddhists believe in which to do it. Okay,
How
that's
would
my
just
personal belief.
how
Uh,
how would or does justice kind of require reincarnation?
well, in the sense that, what if you're never given the opportunity in this lifetime and have to have several to be able to learn the lessons to develop your soul? That's the idea in in that belief system. But I think there's a different way of looking at it that in which there is justice. Um, so anyway, that's perhaps an area which would open up a whole area of theological questions, which I would prefer not to get into theology because I'm not a I'm not a preacher. But from a poetic standpoint, I know these things to be true that I've discussed today, and I believe that it's coherent with the truths in Christianity because they're true, not because they're scripture, not because it's doctrine. And this is a very interesting thing because if you think of religious uh, the religious quality of what I just read you from Shelley, it's a prayer. He's saying a prayer to this divine principle, which he recognizes in his soul. But yet Shelley professed himself to be an atheist, and didn't believe in God because he was so opposed to doctrine, to having to believe something because it is, revealed, because it is written. He believed that this divine quality was within us all and could be discovered by anyone, and he just became militantly anti-Christian. But I've always said that the irony to me is that he was actually more Christian than most Christians are, because of his absolute devotion to this, his intense love of humanity and his devotion to it because of this quality that everyone has. When you recognize this, that every human being has this quality, and you believe that that's their real identity, that's the essence of morality. The essence of morality is love. It's agape. It's not, it's not adhering to certain uh, strictures or dogmas.
I'll conclude by saying that that's empowering because it's synonymous with identity. If we're all expressions of the one thing that exists, be that love, let's call it love or consciousness or energy or whatever we've uh, considered over the last thousands of years, it's identity. And that allows me, like Jesus dying on the cross, forgive them. They know not what they do. All competition and conflict and even the evil is it's just not knowing that there's only one thing here taking all these different forms. So to love you is to love myself. And if you are me, it's only sane to love you too, and to comprehend like an adult sees a child's foibles, mankind being cruel to each other. It's just they just haven't matured to understand you're doing it to yourself, and you have all those horrible feelings that you think you're giving to somebody else by hitting them or killing them, which goes back to one of the first points you made about the organized evil. The people who perpetrate evil, they are creating the world in their own image because they
Mm-hmm.
didn't get that kind of love. So love it all circles back to just when we comprehend love as our identity, then it becomes the way or the tool or the solution or the successful thing to play with to have a happy life and help others have a happy life. Thank you very much, Dan.
And Bruce de Torres has a show as well, so that this actually might be the seed, perhaps, for a fuller show with Bruce and Dan, going through some theological, philosophical discourse too. And I think that idea is overall what you guys just shared back and forth is I appreciated it quite a bit, and overall, this is what Plato is also getting at in the Gorgias too, right? That the that ultimately the person who the fool perceives to be the happiest person, the absolute tyrant who's able to punish their enemies and give themselves as much sensual gratification and as they wish, right? And that they're always hungry for more and they're always able to fulfill their fleshly desires. That seems like the happiest person with all the wealth and fame and power, but they're actually the greatest self-mutilating victims because they're actually doing damage to their own, the best part of their themselves, which is their immortal soul, is actually being mutilated by them being led by the beast, the worst part of themselves. So that, it completely inverts the whole formula that really infected so many people, including in our society today, right? Who think that human beings are just naturally corrupt by our nature, and people can't even imagine a healthy, just world because of this brainwashing. Jerry Medellin, have had one of those two people are about to ask a question or share a thought.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Thanks, Dan. I really like what you were talking about with the Sublime, because I know when I've tried to read Schiller, it's difficult. You really have to concentrate to follow him. He's extremely, and just the little part that you read on the Sublime, and the two aspects of the Sublime and how it leads us to like a higher idea of beauty. But I wanted to ask a question, more practical, because both in terms of poetry, um, it's reciting poetry, because I know sometimes when I'm reciting poetry, I'll do it way too serious, deadly serious, and it people don't quite get it. Or sometimes I'm the opposite. I don't want to be serious, but then I'm too flippant. And Matt and I were talking the other day about it, that we like the way you recite poetry because you don't have those, too serious or too flippant. And I don't know if you can answer it in a short period or whether you need a whole class to, but I'd like to know how you recite poetry, because I really like the way you do it and I can hear it, and it's not too serious, not too flippant. But anyway, that's my question. If you could help us with the way you do it, Dan.
Well, that's an interesting question because, my political associates here in Houston many years ago, we decided to organize a group that would meet every week and read poetry, and that everyone would work on something that they wanted to recite, and the whole group would help them. They would critique it and help them recite it, and together we would discover what an actual truthful and honest recitation was. And when it first started, it was as you described, so serious and dolorous and turgid and mechanical, that it was unlistenable. So Shakespeare's sonnets just sounded like or people were too became too strict in their reading of the prosody, which is the rhythm and music of the poetry, and what kind of rhythm it was written in. So poems, some people would recite, it would sound like, remember when you ran away and left me all alone? They're coming to take me away, ha ha, hee, ho. It sounded mechanical. And then there were people who tried to be too emotive for the sake of emotion, but it was phony, it was fake. And through a process of discussing it, and especially focusing on the flow of the ideas and the emotional content of the ideas that were being expressed, and simply allowing that to dictate how you spoke it, not ending at the end of each line, although sometimes that is helps to accentuate something, but actually speaking the sentence through the ends of lines, following the flow of the thought and the emotion. It's, yeah, I'll give you an example. We recited many times Keats's sonnet, "When I have fears that I may cease to be." Right? Now you can read it in a completely formal way. When I have fears that I may cease to be, before my pen has gleaned my teeming brain, before high piled books and charactery, uh, uh, um, like, oh, I just forgot, hold like rich garners the full ripened, hold like rich garners the full ripened grain. And now that's, you can kind of understand what he's saying, uh, uh, but it sounds so stultified that it really obscures the actual content of what he's saying. He's anguished by the fact that he may not live to actually pour out all of the thought and the profound emotion that he has within him, that he wants to give the world, right? And so you think of that and what he's actually saying when he says, "When I have fears that I may cease to be, before my pen has cleaned my teeming brain, before high piled books and character hold like rich garners the full ripened grain." You see the difference? So it was only through uh, a group of people uh, thinking and working through together how ideas are actually expressed as human speech, and that we were able to arrive at something like um, an honest recitation, and the music will come out because it's written and it's there. The vowel assonance, the beauty of the of the words themselves, the rhyme scheme, all of that's there. You don't need to be controlled by it. Just in the end, it was honesty about what you were actually saying, and not trying to perform, but to actually communicate something to another human being.
Hmm.
So I hope that answers your question.
That's excellent. Yeah, that's the best advice for poetry recitation that I've ever heard. Just be honest and try to communicate honestly what what you understand to other people. It's
Right. Duh.
sounds simple, eh?
Mhm.
All right. Richard just got in there. Richard.
Yeah, I just wanted to share an experience, which is very much along the lines of what you were saying. um, I was in a group where we sang from this hymnal called Sacred Harp Hymnal, which were things written in sort of revolutionary times and around Massachusetts, whatever. And people got into the habit. They're having so much fun with the harmonies and stuff that they're just singing the words in a very sterile way. And I found myself, just like you said, if I actually look at the words, look at the meaning of it, it just totally transformed how it sounds. It just has so much reality to it. So
Mhm.
it's just agreeing with you.
Mhm. Yeah,
Mm.
very similar.
Kelly.
Uh, Dan, you we're talking about the word sublime quite a bit. I think I know what it means. Or it's like I'm greatly attracted to something, yet at the same time there's like a fear or something that makes me like afraid or something. Um, can you define what you mean by sublime yourself? And is there like a false sublime that we should be wary about?
Well, I don't know if there's a false sublime. Um, I can't think of what, I mean, I can think of a phony sublime where it's simply being described, you know, in florid language or something. But again, think of what Schiller said. Um, the sublime it has the effect on us. We know something is sublime when it has the effect on us of both making us feel small physically or endangered, or making aware of the finiteness, the smallness, the weakness and vulnerability of our physical being, because we are weak and vulnerable physical beings. We don't even have, the protections that other animals have, like, teeth and claws and, and things like that. We're very vulnerable. Um, and and the sublime makes us very aware of our physical limits, but yet seems to there's something in us that is attracted to this greatness, whether it be the ocean or the stars at night. The storms have always had this effect on me. A gathering storm, which Shelley, uses it in the Ode to the West Wind, because it's physically imposing, but yet there's something great and powerful and majestic, which makes you think of that within you. It awakens something in you that responds to it. You're aware that there's something in the human psyche which is beyond mere survival, mere pleasure, the senses. We're greater than the senses. That's a simple example of it, but in art, um, it's done in a higher way. I mean, think again of great drama, which makes you aware of the limitations of yourself and the society you live in, but makes you in tragedy makes you also aware that there's something greater. We're capable of something greater and better, but the people in this drama, completely messed it up, and it begs the question of what is it that we're, is more noble about human beings. And again, these great sublime acts in history, like the sacrifice of Joan of Arc, or I, now this is controversial, maybe for some, but think of it as a phenomenon. Whatever your beliefs are, think of the murder of Charlie Kirk just recently, right? And the impact that had on millions and millions of people going to church suddenly, suddenly forced to confront something, a profound issue, that there are some things worth dying for, right? And that that is more important than anything else in life, is these higher questions, which was people were forced to deal with. Also, by the way, organized evil, which I believe was involved, um, you know, satanic cults and that sort of thing. But that's sort of beside the point. That act of dying for something, in the act of doing something for the benefit of others, their spiritual benefit, awakened something very powerful in society, whether you believe in it or not. You have to admit that it did. That's, I believe, an example of the sublime.
Yeah. Richard had a follow-up question, which I think kind of plays into a little bit of the question that Kelly posed and that you addressed. He brings up the LSD experience. Can that be sublime, or is that a dangerous version of the sublime? How would you speak to that? Because a lot of people would say that would be a gateway to the sublime.
I never found it to be. um, uh, a gateway to other aspects, perhaps, of the human psyche. Um, uh, the imagination, certainly. Right? But the feeling of the sublime is something greater than just imagination, um, or mental pyrotechnics, or effects. Um, and I'm not saying that people don't discover profound things um, when in an altered state of consciousness, because consciousness, normal everyday consciousness, limits the mind for purposes of survival. We have to limit the stimuli and the ideas that are in our mind. I mean, when you dream at night, things you didn't even know were in there, are just coming out in all kinds of interesting ways, which if you thought about it and let it dominate your consciousness during daytime, you couldn't function. So there's a limiting aspect of daily consciousness that is a part of simple survival. They put people under hypnosis, and they've been able to, look at a wall full of books for a couple of seconds, and then after they're brought out of hypnosis, uh, to be able to identify the titles of every book. In other words, the information was taken in, the sensory data is there, but if you ever were focused on all the sensory data that you're picking up every day, you couldn't function. You'd just be in a state of confusion all the time. So this limiting quality, again, I'm not a psychologist or anything like that, but I think it's just something that's that is true, limits us. And when something happens that suddenly liberates the mind from that limitation, it might appear to be illumination, but I think it's just what's already there, and you're capable of thinking in a different way about the what's already in your mind. And I think the sublime is something altogether. I think it's something higher and altogether different and accessible to everyone without the use of drugs. That's what enabled me to sort of see the error of what the kind of life that I and my generation had been led into. I don't want to judge anybody, but that's just my personal belief. That makes
And
sense.
again, your Devil at Woodstock poem and the broader documentary that came out of that, I think, are good little expressions of that experience you went through and the insights that you took from that whole thing,
and where it led, where it led.
Right. Yeah.
See, because the psychology of it was personal pleasure, personal enlightenment, personal, adventure, or whatever you might say. But it was all about it hid behind the veil of peace, love, and these kind of platitudes. But ultimately, it was all about personal fulfillment and pleasure.
Mm.
And that naturally led into the 80s yuppie culture, everything else that we have experienced over the last 50 years.
Mm-hmm.
There was I believe, the poison of the generation, because we felt liberated from morality. And those who enticed us, to me, that there's something demonic about it.
Mm.
So I created a very beautiful devil, who very attractive person.
Monty,
Anything?
we're going to give it to you, the last question, Monty.
All right. Thank you very much. Appreciate it, David. Yeah, my question is...
Dan Leach.
Yeah, Dan, I'm sorry.
Right.
My question was somewhat inspired by a recent republication Matt put out on the Campaigner, and he did a series on which the title of it was something along the lines of how Jesus Christ and his followers saved civilization. And in that, it was expressed as, in the beginning was the Logos. uh, sort of an elaboration on the word, but more specifically, logos, going back to the idea of cognition
Mhm.
and the idea of the power of reason being made flesh in an individual. And the reason I point to this is there seems to be this change of narrative today in Christianity or just in popular culture, whereas in order to reach perfection or for a new renaissance to occur, either one of two things has to happen. It's going to take lifetimes of reincarnation to reach perfection at some end state, or else it's going to take some great calamity. And I guess what I'm pointing to, I'd like you to comment upon this idea of the incarnation of the Holy Spirit into human beings. In other words, what it means to be human. Do human beings have that power and capacity to incarnate the logos or the power of reason here and now in this earth? In other words, it doesn't necessarily take lifetimes or some great calamity or the intervention of some, to die and get to a happy hunting ground. In other words, the idea of the logos being made flesh in human beings in the here and now. In other words, considering that possibility about the resurrection and the life really being about the resurrection of the Holy Spirit, not just into one individual, but into a body of Christ, if you will, or a body of light. So if you could comment on that, please.
Well, that's a that's a rather profound point you made. And again, I feel a little uncomfortable sometimes expounding on such things because I don't want to be I don't want to preach a doctrine, but I think the truth of what you're saying is totally coherent with what I've been discussing here. And the answer simply is yes. I mean, this potential sleeps within every human soul. It is what makes us human. It's just something we either through childhood experiences or consciously turning away from it, or simply becoming too involved in the trials of life, we've clouded it over. But it can be reawakened through inspired. Uh, uh, Shelley describes in his work a defense of poetry. Another favorite thing I read, read constantly throughout my life. That sometimes the spark of this divine inspiration, which we've been discussing here in its form of the sublime, can sometimes be it could be in a speech. Think of the Gettysburg Address, right? The soaring beauty of the idea. It's an occasion of great solemnity and sadness. But on the other hand, it's the most uplifting thing you can imagine. This speech is given. Sometimes it could be a single sentence or a line within a song or a poem that suddenly reawakens us to this quality we have within us. It is, but the ability to organize a society around it has always depended, to whatever degree that happened, upon great souls who were devoted to this principle and who loved their fellow human beings and God intensely enough to devote themselves to the purpose of doing this. Think of Dante, and everything he went through, being banished from this place, banished from that place, and threatened with death, everything else, and yet he was devoted to the writing of the Commedia because he knew that this could rescue this collapsing civilization he was born into. And in fact, it did. It did redeem Western civilization. It was the bridge between, the knowledge of the ancient world and the full expression of what Christianity had implied for humanity. It didn't fully affect the organization of society until the Renaissance, and the Renaissance was almost single-handedly created by Dante, on the shoulders of the great minds, Plato and the great minds of the past. So, I mean, I think the answer to your question is yes, but it has to be mediated through concrete individuals, through an act of creativity, which comes out of love. That's
Yep.
Thank you.
I think on that note, Uwe just wrote me a little message. Our dear friend in Germany, Uwe Elschner, has been inspired to make a little Christmas New Year offering with a recitation of Schiller's poem on the beautiful and sublime. Uwe, are you still there?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Right. So thank you, Dan, for your wonderful presentation. And if I may just venture to throw in my 2 cents on the question of whether LSD might lead you to the sublime, I would say definitely not, because that's not a natural experience, and it's something synthetic, and certainly that's not sublime. This may be all sorts of things, but not sublime. That's my 2 cents to that question by Richard. But this poem, which I offered to recite, so you quoted from the text on the sublime, and Schiller wrote in 1795. He wrote a poem which is called On the Beautiful and the Sublime, and later, originally it was called Two Leaders in Life, and it was later renamed apparently for publication. So it goes like this. There are 2 kinds of geniuses who guide you through life. Fortunate are you if they walk beside you, united in their support. One shortens your journey with exhilarating games, making fate and duty lighter on his arm. With jokes and conversation, he accompanies you to the abyss, where mortals stand trembling before the sea of eternity. Here, the other receives you, determined, serious, and silent, carrying you across the depth with his gigantic arm. Never devote yourself to just one. Do not entrust your dignity to the former, nor your happiness to the latter.
That, yeah. I know that poem many years ago. Thanks for reciting it, because I had forgotten about it. I probably read it 30 years ago.
Thank you for your presentation.
Yes. Okay.
Spice de Vega. Well, thank you so much, Uwe. And thank you so much, Dan, and everybody for just sharing this beautiful little dance with immortal, eternal ideas. And I think this really was a great way, the perfect way to end 2025. And we'll jump back into the thick of things next Sunday with a class by Pele Naruff Taylor on some of the subtle missed lessons of World War I, what really caused this absurd war to unfold that never should have happened, were it not for very malevolent, scheming designs that need to be brought to light. So that'll be next Sunday, and hope to see everybody there. Take care, and Happy New Year.
New Year, everyone.
Happy New Year.